When the Apache woman saw the rancher, she screamed at the rattlesnake. The sun had barely started to rise over the endless desert, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The air was still cool, but the ground already held the heat of the coming day. In this lonely, wide-open land, a lone rancher moved with practiced ease, checking the fences that ran like veins across his small piece of the world. His boots crunched against the dry earth, and he could feel the tension in the air, the kind that comes before the desert fully wakes. He had lived here for years, knowing the land and its moods, learning to respect both the sun and the storms, the quiet days and the harsh winds. As he walked, he noticed the distant silhouette of a lone figure moving slowly across the sand. At first, he thought it was a traveler, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman. She seemed cautious, almost afraid, her steps careful as if she was trying not to disturb the earth beneath her. Her clothes were worn and dusty, and she carried little with her. Her hair, dark and tangled, fell over her shoulders in a way that spoke of long days without proper rest. The rancher slowed his pace, curious but cautious. It was unusual to see anyone alone in this part of the desert. The woman, meanwhile, was struggling to keep her focus. She had been traveling for days, moving through the harsh terrain in search of water, food, and safety. Her tribe had been far behind her, and she had been separated during a sudden attack by a rival group. Since then, she had relied on her knowledge of the land and her instincts to survive. Every sound, every shadow, every movement could be a danger. The desert was beautiful, yes, but it was also merciless. She had learned this the hard way. As she walked, her attention was suddenly drawn to a faint rustling sound in the sand. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, closer this time, and she realized with a sharp pang of fear that it was a rattlesnake. The creature coiled, its warning rattle vibrating through the quiet desert air. She felt a chill run down her spine. Her body wanted to run, but she remembered the stories her elders had told her. Sudden movements could provoke the snake. She had to stay calm, think clearly. Just as she braced herself, she caught sight of the rancher approaching. His presence was both startling and oddly reassuring. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and strong hands, the kind of man who looked as if he had faced many dangers and lived through them all. The woman felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly mixed with fear. Could she trust him? The desert had taught her that people were not always kind, even when they appeared to be. She tightened her grip on the small bundle she carried and prepared for whatever might come next. The rattlesnake moved slightly, its tongue flicking in and out, sensing the woman. She could see the faint glint of its eyes, cold and calculating. Her body tensed, ready to react if necessary. And then instinct took over. She screamed, not a shrill, panicked sound, but a sharp, commanding yell that seemed to startle both the snake and the rancher. Her voice carried across the desert, strong and fearless. The snake, taken off guard by the sudden noise, recoiled slightly. The rancher stopped in his tracks, surprised by the intensity of the woman's reaction. He had seen snakes before, plenty of them, but he had never seen someone confront one with such boldness. The rancher moved closer, slowly, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said in a low, calm voice. "It won't hurt you if you stay still." The woman did not lower her guard entirely, but she glanced at him. There was something in his tone, steady and sure, that made her feel slightly safer. The rattlesnake, still wary, eventually uncoiled and slithered away into the sand, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. For a long moment, the desert was silent again. The woman's heart raced, but she felt a strange sense of relief. The rancher finally reached her, stopping a few feet away. He studied her carefully, noticing her worn clothes, the dirt on her skin, and the careful way she carried herself. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, though she could feel the ache in her legs from walking so long. She nodded slightly toward the bundle she carried, indicating her belongings. The rancher smiled faintly, understanding without needing many words. "Let's get you some water," he said. He reached into a small pack he carried and pulled out a canteen. She hesitated for a moment, but then, parched and weary, she took it from him. The water was cool and sweet, a small comfort in the vast, unforgiving desert. She drank slowly, savoring every drop, while the rancher watched carefully, making sure she was okay. After she had finished drinking, he gestured for her to follow him. He led her to a small shaded area near a few rocky outcrops, offering her a place to rest. She sat down cautiously, keeping her eyes on him, unsure of what his intentions were. The rancher, noticing her hesitation, spoke softly, "You're safe here. I won't let anything harm you." His words were simple, but in that moment they carried a weight of truth. She felt a flicker of trust, small but growing. The woman studied him as he worked quietly, checking the surrounding area and making sure no more snakes or other dangers were nearby. She had spent so long relying only on herself, trusting no one, that the idea of someone offering help without asking for anything in return was almost foreign. Yet there was something about this man, the way he moved with confidence and care, that made her believe he could be trusted. As the day grew hotter, the rancher helped her find some shade and offered her more water. He pointed to the distant mountains, explaining where she could find food or shelter if she had to continue traveling. Though she did not fully understand his words, his gestures and tone made his meaning clear. He was offering guidance, a small map of safety in a desert that had offered her so little comfort. For the first time in many days, the woman felt a small sense of hope. The desert had been harsh and unforgiving, but this encounter, sudden and unexpected, offered a chance to survive a little longer. She realized that this man, this rancher, could be the difference between another day of struggle and a small measure of safety. As the sun climbed higher, the rancher sat down a short distance away, keeping an eye on her but giving her space. The woman rested, leaning against a rock, feeling the heat of the day on her skin. She thought about the rattlesnake, the fear that had gripped her and the scream that had startled it away. That scream had been instinct, a mix of fear and courage, and it had drawn the rancher's attention. Without it, she might have faced the snake alone. She realized that even in fear, bravery could find a way. The rancher watched her quietly, noticing the intelligence and strength in her eyes. He had seen many travelers and wanderers in his life, but something about her stood out. She had survived alone in a harsh land, relying on her wits and courage. That alone earned his respect. He also understood that this was just the beginning. Their meeting had been sudden, almost accidental, but it held the potential for something more: trust, understanding, and perhaps even friendship. By late afternoon, the woman had gathered her strength, and the rancher prepared to guide her back to a safer area near his ranch. The desert was still wide and unforgiving, but with each step, she felt a little less alone. She glanced at the rancher, realizing that even in this harsh world, there were people who could help, who could offer protection without asking for anything in return. The thought was new, strange, and comforting all at once. As they moved together toward the ranch, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. The desert was quiet again, save for the soft rustle of the wind through the rocks. The woman felt a mixture of relief, caution, and curiosity. Who was this man? Why had he stopped for her? And yet, despite the questions, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the desert was not entirely without mercy. By the time they reached the edge of the ranch, the sky was painted with deep reds and purples. The rancher stopped and pointed to a small cabin in the distance, offering her shelter for the night. She nodded silently, grateful but still wary. She knew the desert would test her again, but for now she had survived the day, survived the rattlesnake, and found an unexpected ally. That night, as she rested inside the small cabin, she thought about the events of the day, the fear, the courage, the stranger who had helped her. She realized that life in the desert was unpredictable, but sometimes it offered moments of connection, even in the most unlikely places. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the desert outside, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to hope. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth. Inside the small cabin, the Apache woman lay on a rough blanket, her body still tense from the day's dangers. She had never slept in a place so quiet and safe, and yet she remained cautious. The desert had taught her to trust very few people, and strangers were often more dangerous than the animals that prowled the land. She listened to the soft creak of the cabin's wooden walls, the distant howl of a coyote, and the occasional chirp of an insect. Every sound reminded her that the world outside was vast and unpredictable. The rancher, meanwhile, was tending to a small fire near the doorway. The flames cast long, dancing shadows across the cabin, illuminating his weathered face and strong hands. He watched the woman from a distance, careful not to seem imposing. He understood that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. He had seen too many people lose their lives in the desert because they had been too trusting or too stubborn. This woman, traveling alone and clearly exhausted, needed more than shelter. She needed someone who could help her survive, someone she could slowly rely on. The Apache woman finally spoke, her voice low and cautious. "Water, more." Her English was limited, broken, and hesitant. She pointed to the canteen he had given her earlier. The rancher smiled softly and nodded, understanding her without needing perfect words. He poured a little more water into a cup and handed it to her. She drank slowly, savoring the cool liquid as it eased the dryness of her throat. The small act of kindness felt enormous to her, a rare reminder that not all humans were threats. After she had rested for a few moments, the rancher offered her some food, dried meat, corn, and a few pieces of bread. She examined it warily at first, unused to receiving a meal without conditions. Hunger had driven her to accept many things during her travels, but this felt different. There was no expectation, no trick, no danger hidden within. Tentatively, she began to eat, appreciating the nourishment and the safety that came with it. The rancher waited patiently, letting her eat at her own pace. As the evening wore on, the Apache woman and the rancher began to communicate in small, careful ways. She pointed to the scars on her arms and legs, remnants of the desert's harsh challenges, and he nodded, understanding the story they told. He showed her how to light a small fire for warmth and how to keep it safe, demonstrating with calm movements. She watched him closely, noticing the way his hands moved confidently, how he understood the land and its secrets. Despite the language gap, there was a quiet connection forming between them. The woman told him her name with a small gesture. "Ahioka," she said softly, touching her chest. The rancher repeated the name carefully, trying to remember it. "Ahioka," he said, and she nodded, a small smile touching her lips. Names were important, she realized, a way to mark identity in a world that often tried to erase it. By exchanging names, they had taken the first step toward understanding each other, bridging the gap between fear and trust. As night deepened, the desert outside became alive with soft sounds, the wind whispering through the rocks, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the rustle of small animals moving through the sand. Ahioka shivered slightly, more from habit than cold, and the rancher noticed. He moved closer but not too close, offering her a blanket to wrap around herself. She hesitated, then accepted it, feeling the warmth against her skin. It was a small comfort, but in the vastness of the desert, even small comforts mattered greatly. They spent hours in quiet companionship, sitting near the fire, sharing gestures and occasional words. The rancher pointed to the moon and stars, explaining where water could be found in the desert and which plants were safe to eat. Ahioka listened intently, recognizing the wisdom in his words, even if she could not understand every detail. In return, She showed him how to identify subtle signs in the desert, the tracks of animals, the movement of birds, and the faint trails that led to hidden water sources. Slowly, he realized that her knowledge of the land was remarkable, honed by years of living close to nature, surviving where others might fail. By midnight, a sense of calm settled over the cabin. Ahioka lay back against the blanket, her mind racing with memories of her tribe and her journey, but also with a cautious hope. The rancher sat nearby, keeping watch over the desert beyond the cabin. He had faced many dangers in his life, from storms to wild animals, but there was something about Ahioka's courage and resilience that impressed him deeply. She had survived alone for days, relying only on her instincts, and yet she had not lost her humanity. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a warm glow across the sand and rocks. Ahioka awoke to the sound of birds singing and the rancher moving about outside. He had already started tending to the small garden near the cabin, checking the fences and preparing a simple breakfast. She watched him silently, noting the ease with which he handled the tasks, the way he seemed to know the land intimately. Despite the hardships of the desert, he moved with confidence and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos she had faced in recent days. After a simple meal, the rancher gestured for her to follow him outside. He led her to a shaded area near the water trough, showing her how to fill her canteen and clean the small dishes. She mimicked his actions carefully, learning quickly. Every step, every gesture was a lesson in survival, and she absorbed it eagerly. The rancher spoke in short, simple sentences, pointing and demonstrating, and she responded with gestures and words she had learned from the brief interactions the night before. Though their communication was limited, understanding grew steadily between them. As the day progressed, Ahioka and the rancher faced small challenges together. A gust of wind blew dust across the yard, scattering tools and stirring up sand. Ahioka quickly moved to shield the fire, while the rancher secured the tools and checked the fence line for damage. Their movements were coordinated without words, a silent teamwork that spoke of growing trust. She began to see him not only as a helper, but as someone who could be relied upon in moments of danger. In turn, the rancher observed Ahioka's instincts. She moved quietly, always aware of her surroundings, noticing small signs in the desert that he might have missed. He realized that her knowledge of the land was invaluable, a perspective shaped by experience and survival rather than formal teaching. Respect for her grew with every observation, and he found himself quietly admiring her resilience. It was rare to meet someone who understood the desert so intimately, and even rarer to see such bravery in the face of fear. By evening, they returned to the cabin, tired but accomplished. Ahioka rested against the blanket once more, feeling a small sense of security that she had not felt in a long time. The rancher prepared another simple meal, and they shared it in companionable silence. The desert outside was quiet, the only sounds the soft sigh of the wind and the occasional rustle of animals. Inside the cabin, warmth and safety created a small world separate from the harshness beyond the walls. As night fell again, Ahioka reflected on the events of the day. She had survived, learned new skills, and begun to trust another human being. The rancher had not forced her, had not asked for anything in return. He had only offered guidance, protection, and a sense of safety. She realized that trust could be built slowly, through shared experiences and mutual respect. The desert had taught her to rely on herself, but it had also shown her that connection with another person could be a source of strength. The rancher sat near the fire, watching the desert, his mind thoughtful. He had not expected to meet someone like Ahioka, someone so strong, yet cautious, so aware of danger, yet willing to accept help. He understood the fragility of trust in the desert, and he valued the small steps they had taken together. Their bond was growing, not through words alone, but through shared experience, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding of each other's strength. As they prepared for sleep, the desert outside remained vast and unforgiving, but inside the cabin there was a small sanctuary. Ahioka felt a sense of belonging that she had not known since leaving her tribe. The rancher had not only provided shelter, but had also shown her that bravery and caution could coexist, that trust could be earned slowly and carefully. The events of the past 2 days, the rattlesnake, the journey, the shared meals and lessons, had created a foundation for something new: understanding, respect, and perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. The night passed quietly, and when the first light of morning touched the desert, Ahioka was ready to face the day once more. She had learned more than she expected, not just about survival, but about human kindness and the possibility of trust. The rancher prepared to guide her to safer areas near the ranch, knowing that each step they took together would strengthen the bond between them. The desert was still harsh, still full of dangers, but for the first time in a long while, Ahioka felt that she might not have to face it alone. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand and rocks. The sky was clear, a deep blue stretching endlessly in all directions. Ahioka stepped outside the small cabin, blinking against the bright light. She had slept well for the first time in days, her body finally finding rest after the long journey through the harsh desert. The rancher was already moving about, tending to the small garden and checking the fences. He worked with steady, deliberate motions, each task performed with a quiet confidence that spoke of years of experience living in this land. Ahioka watched him silently, fascinated by the ease with which he handled everything. She noticed how he inspected the fences, gently tightening a loose wire here, adjusting a post there, making sure everything was secure. In the desert, protection was not just about safety from wild animals. It was also about maintaining the small structures that allowed life to exist in such a harsh place. She admired his skill and attention to detail, realizing that survival required not just courage but also patience, precision, and care. The rancher looked up and saw Ahioka watching him. He smiled faintly and gestured for her to help him check the fences. She approached cautiously, her movements careful but deliberate. He handed her a piece of wire, demonstrating how to fasten it securely. At first, she struggled, her fingers unused to the tools, but he guided her patiently, showing her the proper way to bend and twist the metal. Slowly, she began to understand, and a small sense of pride grew within her. She was learning, adapting, and beginning to feel useful in this new environment. After they finished the fence, the rancher led Ahioka to the small garden near the cabin. He showed her how to water the plants, explaining which ones were edible and which were used for healing. Ahioka listened intently, recognizing the wisdom in his words. In return, she shared her own knowledge of the land. She pointed out certain plants that could be used for medicine or food, showing him how to identify them by their leaves, color, and smell. The rancher was impressed. Her knowledge of the desert, learned from years of living close to nature, complemented his own experience in ways he had not expected. As the day grew hotter, they took a break under the shade of a nearby rock formation. Ahioka rested, sipping water from her canteen, while the rancher checked the surrounding area for any signs of danger. He noticed the way she observed the land, always alert, always cautious. Even in moments of rest, her eyes scanned the horizon, noting every movement, every shadow. He realized that her instincts were finely tuned, shaped by necessity and experience. In the desert, such awareness could mean the difference between life and death. After their rest, the rancher decided to take Ahioka on a short journey across the land surrounding the ranch. He wanted her to learn more about the area, to understand where water could be found, where animals were likely to roam, and how to move safely through the open desert. Ahioka agreed, eager to learn but also cautious. She had been on her own for so long that trusting another person completely was still difficult. Yet, she felt a growing sense of confidence. The rancher had not only helped her survive, but he had also shown respect for her skills and knowledge. As they walked, they encountered a small herd of deer grazing near a distant water source. Ahioka's eyes widened with recognition. She pointed toward the animals, demonstrating how to approach quietly and observe without startling them. The rancher followed her lead, impressed by her careful movements and the way she read the land. Together, they watched the deer for a few moments, learning from each other's observations. The experience was both educational and peaceful, a rare moment of calm in the challenging desert environment. Later, they came across a rocky outcrop that offered a view of the surrounding plains. The rancher pointed to various landmarks, the distant mountains, a cluster of trees that marked a water source, and a small canyon that provided shelter during storms. Ahioka nodded, absorbing the information. She began to understand the layout of the land, recognizing patterns and routes that would help her navigate safely. The rancher, in turn, observed how she processed the information, noting her ability to quickly identify useful details. He realized that her knowledge of the natural world was extraordinary, a complement to his own practical experience. As the day wore on, they returned to the ranch, tired but satisfied. Ahioka had learned a great deal about the land, while the rancher had gained a deeper appreciation for her skills and instincts. Their relationship was evolving, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Neither of them had spoken much about their pasts, but the quiet understanding between them was growing stronger with each passing hour. That evening, a sudden desert storm approached. Dark clouds rolled in from the horizon, and the wind began to whip across the plains. Dust and sand filled the air, reducing visibility and making movement difficult. The rancher acted quickly, leading Ahioka back to the cabin and securing the doors and windows. Together, they reinforced the shelter, using ropes and boards to ensure it would withstand the storm. Ahioka moved with calm efficiency, following the rancher's instructions while also using her own instincts to anticipate the wind's direction and strength. Inside the cabin, the storm raged outside, but they were safe. The wind howled, rattling the walls, and rain began to fall in sudden, heavy bursts. Ahioka sat near the fire, listening to the storm and feeling the warmth of the flames. She realized that the rancher's calm and steady presence had helped her feel secure, even in the face of danger. The desert had always been unpredictable, but now she understood that careful preparation and teamwork could overcome even the most threatening conditions. After the storm passed, the air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and desert plants. Ahioka and the rancher stepped outside, inspecting the land for any damage. The fences were intact, the garden had survived, and the small cabin had withstood the storm. They exchanged a look of relief and satisfaction. Together, they had faced the desert's challenges and emerged unscathed. The experience strengthened their bond, proving that they could rely on each other in times of danger. In the days that followed, life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. Ahioka learned to tend the garden, care for the animals, and move safely through the desert. She shared her knowledge of plants and survival skills, teaching the rancher new ways to understand the land. In turn, he taught her practical skills, how to mend fences, maintain the cabin, and use tools she had never handled before. Their cooperation was seamless, a silent understanding guiding their actions. As they worked side by side, they began to share small stories of their pasts. Ahioka spoke of her tribe, the lessons she had learned from her elders, and the challenges she had faced while traveling alone. The rancher shared his own experiences, his life on the ranch, the dangers he had faced, and the lessons the desert had taught him. Their words were simple, but they carried weight. Each story revealed courage, resilience, and a deep connection to the land. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden light across the plains, they faced another challenge. A sudden rattlesnake appeared near the water trough, its warning rattle echoing across the desert. Ahioka froze for a moment, memories of her first encounter with a snake rushing back. But then she remembered the rancher's calm guidance and her own growing confidence. She stepped forward, her movements deliberate and precise, guiding the rancher as they carefully removed the snake from the area. Together, they ensured that it could not harm the animals or themselves. The incident left them both smiling, a mixture of relief and pride shining in their eyes. They had faced danger together and succeeded, relying on each other's strengths. Ahioka realized that she was no longer entirely alone in the desert. She had found an ally, someone who respected her abilities and shared the burden of survival. The rancher, in turn, admired her bravery and skill, recognizing that her presence had made the ranch safer and richer in knowledge. As evening fell, they returned to the cabin, tired but content. The desert was quiet, the sky painted with hues of orange, pink, and purple. Ahioka sat near the fire, reflecting on the days that had passed. She had learned so much, not only about survival but also about trust, companionship, and the value of working together. The rancher joined her, and for a long moment they simply sat in silence, watching the flames dance and feeling the comfort of shared experience. In that quiet moment, Ahioka realized that her journey through the desert had brought her to a place she had never expected. She had found safety, knowledge, and respect in the form of a man she barely knew, yet had come to trust. The rancher, observing her thoughtful expression, understood that she had begun to see the ranch as more than just a temporary refuge. It was becoming a home, a place where she could rebuild strength and hope. Night fell completely, and the desert outside was filled with the sounds of wind, insects, and distant animals. Inside the cabin, warmth, light, and safety created a small sanctuary. Ahioka curled up under a blanket, thinking of the lessons she had learned, the dangers they had faced, and the trust that had grown between them. She realized that survival was no longer a solitary struggle. It could be shared, strengthened by cooperation and respect. As she drifted to sleep, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in many months. The rancher kept watch near the fire, his eyes scanning the horizon, ready for any threat. Together they had begun to build a life in the desert, not easy, not without challenges, but grounded in courage, knowledge, and trust. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, Ahioka allowed herself to imagine a future where she was no longer alone, where the desert's harshness could be met with shared strength and understanding. The desert was quiet in the early morning, with only the gentle rustling of dry leaves and the distant calls of birds breaking the silence. Ahioka stepped outside the cabin, stretching her tired muscles. She had grown stronger over the past days, learning to handle the hardships of desert life with the rancher's guidance. Each day brought new lessons about the land, the animals, and most importantly, herself. She was no longer the weary, frightened traveler who had first screamed at the rattlesnake. She had learned to move with confidence, trust her instincts, and work alongside someone who respected her. The rancher was already at work, repairing a section of fence that had weakened in the past storm. His hands moved skillfully, tying knots and adjusting posts with ease. Ahioka approached and offered to help. At first he hesitated, but then nodded, realizing her abilities had grown. Together, they worked quietly, side by side, communicating through gestures and short words. Their teamwork was seamless, built on shared respect and understanding rather than long conversations. The sun climbed higher, and the heat began to press down on them, but they continued their work, determined to finish before the desert became too harsh. By late morning, word of the lone Apache woman at the ranch had begun to spread to nearby towns. Some townspeople were curious, but others were wary or openly hostile. They whispered about her, questioning why a woman from a distant tribe would be living alone with a rancher. Ahioka had noticed the strange looks from travelers passing by, but she said nothing. She had learned that words could often bring danger if not used carefully. The rancher, however, was aware of the growing tension and made a silent vow to protect her. He had faced threats before, from wild animals and the harsh desert, and he would not allow human prejudice to harm someone who had shown courage and trust. As the afternoon sun blazed overhead, a sudden disturbance caught their attention. Near the edge of the water trough, a rattlesnake had appeared, its warning rattle echoing across the ranch. Ahioka froze for a moment, memories of her first encounter rushing back. The sound made her pulse quicken, but she quickly regained control. The rancher moved toward her calmly, his presence steady and reassuring. "Stay calm," he said, his voice low and even. "We can handle this." Ahioka nodded, her fear replaced by determination. She remembered the lessons of the past days, how to observe the land, how to anticipate danger, and how to act with precision. Slowly, she stepped forward, guiding the rancher to a safe position. Together, they assessed the snake's movements, predicting its next action. Using a long stick, the rancher carefully nudged the rattlesnake away from the water and livestock, while Ahioka stayed alert, ready to react if it tried to strike. After a tense few moments, the snake slithered away into the desert, leaving them both relieved. The incident strengthened their bond even further. Ahioka realized that she could rely on the rancher in moments of danger, just as he could rely on her knowledge and instincts. They had faced fear together and emerged unscathed. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of connection, not just as companions but as equals who shared the challenges of desert life. The rancher, in turn, admired her courage and precision. He had faced many dangers in his life, but few people had shown the calm intelligence that Ahioka displayed. Later that day, they encountered another challenge. A sudden desert storm approached, dark clouds rolling in from the horizon. The wind picked up quickly, carrying sand and dust that stung the skin and made breathing difficult. The rancher immediately took action, calling Ahioka to help secure the animals and reinforce the cabin. They worked together efficiently, tying down loose items, checking the fences, and ensuring that the livestock were safe. Ahioka moved with confidence, her previous fears replaced by experience and skill. The storm hit with full force, but their preparations held. The cabin and ranch remained intact, a testament to their teamwork and determination. After the storm passed, they stepped outside to assess the damage. The desert was transformed, the ground damp and fragrant with the scent of rain. Small plants had been nourished, and the air felt clean and alive. Ahioka and the rancher exchanged a look of satisfaction. Together, they had weathered the storm, just as they had faced other challenges before. The desert had tested them, but they had proven that cooperation, courage, and knowledge could overcome even the harshest conditions. As evening fell, they returned to the cabin, exhausted but content. Ahioka prepared a simple meal, using the knowledge she had gained from the rancher and her own instincts about desert plants. The rancher watched her with admiration, impressed by how quickly she had adapted to life on the ranch. They ate in quiet companionship, the warmth of the fire and the shared experience of the day providing comfort and security. The desert outside was vast and still, but inside the cabin, they had created a small sanctuary where trust, respect, and cooperation flourished. Over the following days, their routine continued. They tended the ranch, cared for the animals, and explored the surrounding desert. Each day brought new lessons and small victories. Ahioka learned how to use tools and maintain the structures of the ranch, while the rancher gained insights from her knowledge of plants, water sources, and desert signs. Together they became more than companions. They were partners, each contributing their strengths to overcome the challenges of the harsh environment. One afternoon, a traveler passed by the ranch, bringing news from the nearby town. Some people had questioned the presence of the Apache woman, expressing distrust and suspicion. The rancher listened calmly, his expression unchanging. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "She has done nothing wrong. We have worked together, survived together, and that is what matters." Ahioka nodded, appreciating his words. She realized that while the desert was unpredictable and human prejudice could be dangerous, they had each other's support. Together, they could face not only the challenges of the land but also the judgments of those around them. Ahioka's confidence continued to grow. She took on more responsibilities at the ranch, tending the garden, feeding the animals, and helping with repairs. Her movements were precise and careful, learned from both the rancher's guidance and her own experience. She began to feel a sense of belonging, something she had not known since being separated from her tribe. The rancher noticed this change, recognizing that trust and respect had created a foundation for stability and partnership. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and red, they encountered another rattlesnake near the edge of the property. This time, Ahioka did not freeze. She immediately assessed the situation, guiding the rancher to a safe position while carefully watching the snake's movements. Using a combination of knowledge, skill, and teamwork, they managed to remove the snake safely without harm. The incident was a reminder of the desert's constant challenges, but also of their growing ability to face danger together. Afterward, they sat quietly near the fire, reflecting on the day's events. Ahioka realized that her fear of the desert had diminished. She had learned to anticipate danger, trust her instincts, and rely on someone she had come to respect deeply. The rancher, observing her calm and confident demeanor, understood that she had grown stronger, more capable, and more resilient. Their bond had deepened through shared challenges, and mutual respect had become the foundation of their relationship. As night fell, the desert outside was filled with the sounds of wind, insects, and distant animals. Inside the cabin, warmth, light, and safety created a sanctuary from the harsh world beyond. Ahioka lay under a blanket thinking of the lessons she had learned and the trust that had grown between them. She understood that survival was no longer a solitary struggle. It could be shared, strengthened by cooperation and mutual respect. The rancher kept watch near the fire, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. He knew that the desert was unpredictable, but he also knew that together, they could face whatever challenges came their way. The days of fear and isolation were behind them. They had built a partnership based on courage, knowledge, and trust, and each day strengthened the bond that had begun with a scream at a rattlesnake. In the quiet of the night, Ahioka allowed herself to imagine the future. She no longer felt entirely alone in the desert. She had found someone who respected her abilities, shared the burden of survival, and offered protection without demanding anything in return. The rancher, in turn, recognized the value of her presence, her courage, and her skill. Together, they had created a life in the desert that was not easy, but was filled with trust, respect, and shared strength. As the stars appeared in the sky, twinkling like distant fires, Ahioka drifted to sleep with a sense of peace she had not known for many months. The desert outside remained vast and challenging, but inside the cabin, safety, warmth, and companionship provided comfort. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she also knew that she would not face them alone. The bond they had forged through danger, cooperation, and mutual respect would guide them, offering strength in the harsh and unpredictable desert. The desert dawn broke slowly, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink. Ahioka stepped outside the cabin, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life on the ranch, yet each day still held new lessons and challenges. Over the past weeks, she had learned to navigate the harsh land, care for the animals, and work alongside the rancher. What she had not anticipated was the deep trust and respect that had grown between them, a bond stronger than the desert itself. The rancher, already at work repairing a section of fence, noticed her watching him. He offered a small nod and smile, a silent acknowledgement of her growing skill. Ahioka returned the gesture, feeling a quiet pride. She had come far since the day she had stumbled across the desert, exhausted, scared, and alone. The woman who had screamed at the rattlesnake was no longer the same. She had become confident, capable, and aware of her surroundings. Her instincts were sharp, and her courage had only grown. As they worked together, a soft wind rustled through the desert grasses, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Ahioka moved beside the rancher, mimicking his careful movements, learning the subtleties of his skill and applying her own knowledge of the land. She pointed out subtle signs in the soil, tracks left by small animals, and nearby plants that could be used for medicine. The rancher nodded in appreciation, realizing how much her presence had enriched his life on the ranch. Their partnership was no longer about simple survival. It was about learning, growing, and building a life together. Later in the morning, they noticed smoke rising in the distance. At first, they thought it might be a wildfire, common in the dry desert. But as they got closer, they realized it was a small group of travelers, lost and struggling to find their way. Ahioka felt a pang of concern. She had been in a similar position not long ago. The rancher gestured for her to stay close, and together they approached cautiously. The travelers looked relieved when they saw the rancher and Ahioka, recognizing the safety the ranch offered. Ahioka communicated with the travelers through gestures and broken words, offering water and guidance. She felt a deep sense of empathy, remembering her own days of fear and exhaustion in the desert. The rancher helped as well, explaining directions and providing practical advice for navigating the harsh land. Watching them, Ahioka realized how far she had come, not just in survival skills, but in understanding the importance of compassion and assistance. Her own experience had taught her that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about helping others when they needed it most. After the travelers moved on, Ahioka and the rancher returned to the ranch, their minds thoughtful. The desert stretched endlessly around them, harsh yet beautiful, full of life and challenge. They worked in silence for a while, repairing fences and checking the animals. The quiet companionship between them was comfortable, a bond that did not require constant words to express itself. Each action, each glance, and each shared effort built a trust that was stronger than anything either had known before. As the afternoon sun climbed high, a new challenge appeared, an approaching herd of wild coyotes, moving closer to the livestock. Ahioka noticed them first, her sharp eyes spotting the subtle movements among the distant rocks. She gestured to the rancher, and together they devised a plan. They used noise and strategic movement to guide the coyotes away from the animals without harming them. It was a delicate balance of caution and courage, and they executed it flawlessly. Their teamwork had become seamless, a natural rhythm of cooperation forged through shared experience. After the coyotes moved on, they sat near the water trough, catching their breath. Ahioka looked at the rancher, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had not only helped her survive, but had also shown her that trust, respect, and shared effort could create safety and stability in a world that often seemed unforgiving. The rancher, observing her calm and confident demeanor, realized that she had become a true partner, someone whose presence strengthened the ranch, both in practical ways and in spirit. As evening approached, they prepared a small meal together, using the produce from the garden and the knowledge they had gained about edible plants. Ahioka took the lead in some parts, showing the rancher how to identify the best herbs and grains, while he handled the cooking and fire preparation. The process was quiet and methodical, filled with small gestures of cooperation and understanding. The meal was simple, but to both of them it represented something far greater, the results of shared effort, trust, and the growing bond between them. As darkness fell over the desert, the sky transformed into a canopy of stars, brilliant and infinite. Ahioka sat near the fire, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she had screamed at the rattlesnake, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She had found not only safety but also companionship, respect, and a sense of purpose. The desert, which had once been a place of fear and isolation, had become a home, a place where she could thrive alongside someone who understood and valued her. The rancher joined her by the fire, his eyes scanning the horizon even as the warmth of the flames provided comfort. He spoke softly, recounting a small story from his past, a lesson learned about patience and observation in the desert. Ahioka listened intently, appreciating not just the content of his story but the trust implied in sharing it. Their conversations had become moments of connection, where words, gestures, and shared experience combined to build understanding and friendship. Later that night, a gentle desert wind blew through the cabin, carrying the scent of sage and earth. Ahioka lay under her blanket, feeling the quiet strength of the rancher's presence nearby. She realized that her journey through the desert had taught her not only survival, but also the value of human connection. Trust, respect, and cooperation could be just as vital as instinct and skill. The rancher had shown her that courage was not only about facing danger alone, but also about sharing it with someone who cared and understood. In the following days, their life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm. Ahioka took on more responsibilities, tending to the garden, caring for the animals, and assisting with repairs. She shared her knowledge of the desert, helping the rancher identify edible plants, water sources, and signs of wildlife. In turn, he continued to teach her practical skills, how to use tools, repair structures, and maintain safety around the ranch. Their relationship had evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and shared effort. One afternoon, as they worked together near the water trough, Ahioka noticed a small rattlesnake slithering toward the edge of the ranch. She acted quickly, signaling to the rancher and moving into position. Using the techniques they had learned together, they carefully guided the snake away from the animals and the cabin. The process was calm and precise, a demonstration of their teamwork and understanding. When the snake finally moved into the desert, they shared a quiet look of satisfaction. Each challenge they faced together strengthened their bond, proving that courage and cooperation could overcome fear and danger. As the sun set that evening, casting golden light across the desert, Ahioka and the rancher sat near the fire, watching the shadows stretch across the plains. Ahioka felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with fear and isolation had led to trust, companionship, and mutual respect. She realized that she had found a home, not just a place to survive, but a place where she belonged. The rancher had become more than a protector. He was a partner, someone whose life was intertwined with hers through shared experience and understanding. That night, as the desert grew quiet and the stars shone brightly, Ahioka allowed herself to dream. She imagined a future where she and the rancher continued to face the challenges of the desert together, supporting and learning from each other. She felt a sense of gratitude for the harsh journey that had brought her here, understanding that each struggle had prepared her for this new life. The desert, once a place of fear, had become a canvas for courage, trust, and shared purpose. The rancher kept watch near the fire, ensuring their safety while allowing Ahioka to rest. He reflected on the journey as well, realizing that their bond had become something rare and valuable. They had faced danger, learned from each other, and built a life based on respect, cooperation, and shared experience. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, they had found strength in partnership, a strength that would carry them through the challenges yet to come. As the night deepened, the desert fell into a calm silence, broken only by the distant call of a coyote or the rustle of small animals. Inside the cabin, warmth, light, and safety created a sanctuary from the world outside. Ahioka and the rancher had weathered storms, confronted danger, and built trust. Their journey, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into a story of courage, companionship, and mutual respect. In the quiet moments before sleep, Ahioka reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had survived alone in the desert, faced countless dangers, and learned to trust herself and others. The rancher had guided her, protected her, and treated her as an equal. Together they had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenge, emerging stronger and more connected than ever. The desert, once a place of isolation, had become a place of growth, understanding, and hope. As the stars twinkled above, Ahioka drifted to sleep with a sense of peace and belonging. She knew that the desert would always hold challenges, but she also knew that she would never face them alone. The rancher, her partner in survival and life, would be by her side. Together, they had built a life based on courage, respect, and shared experience. A life that offered not just survival, but hope, trust, and the possibility of happiness.